Hi, and welcome to this amazing episode of the Get Trauma Informed podcast. And I say amazing episode because we have such an incredible guest here today. I am so happy to meet you, Nick. How are you today?
I'm awesome, Liz. I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time now. So excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to talk about your incredible story. But first of all, let's talk about who you are. You are a top motivational speaker by Yahoo Finance in 2022, and you're a top speaker, a real estate coach. Is there anything that I left off there?
No, I think you got it, and all of that is really surrounding my story of my getting in a snowboarding accident when I was younger. So um, let's start right there, and I think it will encapsulate a lot of it. So Liz, I was at ski club with my friends when I only was in eighth grade. So it's always an exciting thing when you're in eighth grade and you get released from school just a little bit early. That's always an exciting thing. So my friends and I had brought all of our gear on the bus to get ready so we wouldn't miss a precious moment once we got to the mountain. And we got to the mountain and headed right for the chairlift, where the rest of the class went inside and wasted like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour getting ready. We were already ready to go. We didn't want to waste any time. So headed right for the chairlift. And on the ride up, we noticed that it was very icy. So people were wiping out everywhere. However, that didn't really phase us. And the chairlift actually went right over the terrain park where all of the jumps were. And it actually went over the biggest jump in the terrain park. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, yeah, that's got my name all over it. So uh, got to the top, buckled into my snowboard, took a breath of that crisp winter air, and confidently charged towards that jump with all my speed. Going up to the jump, I caught the edge of my snowboard, and that was the last thing that I remember. So, due to the severity of my injuries, they wanted to bring a helicopter to the mountain to rush me to the hospital, and they couldn't because it was too windy. So, they had to send in an ambulance. And out of the six paramedics, there was only one who could intubate right on the spot. And I needed that to be able to breathe. And lucky for me, he was one of the paramedics that showed up to the mountain that day. And there are really several things that I still can't explain about my accident, about that day. And one of which is the reason that I'm here to be able to tell this story today. And also, that's no matter the severity of your crisis, your decision to take action is your first step. So something else I learned was that so that was the first thing that really saved my life, that the right paramedic showed up at the mountain that day. The second thing was, although I wasn't wearing a helmet, the goggles that the snowboarding goggles that I had on had a lot of padding on them, believe it or not. And I learned that not only did they brace my fall, the initial impact, as I continued to roll down the hill and hit my mountain, as I continued to roll down the mountain and hit my head, I learned that the goggles mysteriously moved with each blow to cushion each blow as I rolled down the mountain. And the third thing, once I made it to the hospital, and I was out for the count. I was resting in the ICU, unable to communicate with anyone. I was in a coma. And the doctors, so the third thing was the doctors would come into my room to share the not so good news, not so good news, and not so good news, as I'm sure you can imagine, from someone who's dealt with trauma yourself and interviewed a lot of people. The doctors have to paint the worst case scenario for liability reasons. So they went to do that with my parents right in front of me. And even though I was in a coma, my mom still understood that. And I hesitated there when I said my mom. I used to say, up until a few months ago, Liz, I used to say my parents understood that even though I was out, I was in a coma, I was still taking in information. My dad was actually on his show a few months ago, and he corrected me. He said, "I don't Nick, I don't want to take credit for that. That was your mom. That wasn't me. So my mom stopped the doctors and she said, let's go outside the room, not in front of him. And once they were outside the room, that's where the doctors shared with my parents that I probably wouldn't be able to walk, talk, or eat on my own ever again. So even if I was able to come out of the coma, there was a good chance that I would need 24-hour care for the rest of my life. And my parents, to their credit, didn't accept this like so many patients do as a death sentence. They took the information, thanked the doctors, and then what this did, Liz, it allowed me to treat it like any other situation. So a month, I ended up being in the coma for 3 weeks. I don't remember a month because it was a partially induced coma. They had to wait for the swelling to come down in my brain in order to wean me off the medication, the drugs that saved my life. I was in it for 3 weeks. I don't remember a month. Came out, and what it allowed me to do, because none of that information got through to me, unconsciously, subconsciously, whatever, never got through to me. It just allowed me to treat it like any other situation. So I got up, did the best that I could, and I kept getting better every day. And it was right along this time that I unknowingly started to use a system to not only make a full recovery, but run out of the hospital. And that's what we teach to this day at Common Goal. And I also teach with the one-on-one work that I do with clients and in keynotes, like 50 and 60-minute keynotes for other organizations who support individuals that are dealing with trauma. So STEP is an acronym. It's a STEP system. Stands for S. The S is support. So make sure that you have the support of your family and friends right from the beginning. And this is going to have you falling back on relationships that you built prior to your setback. T is trust. Trust that once you take your first step, your next step is always going to be available to you. And this also starts with trusting yourself. So trust that you have this voice or calling inside of you for a reason. So how this comes into play, and how I always love talking about this in several ways, is I overheard a month after my accident, when I was in the rehab hospital, I overheard my parents meeting with my doctors and therapists. And they said, all right, what do we need to do to make sure Nick makes a full recovery? I heard in the back of my head, no, you're going to run out. So then I still wasn't able to talk. I was still in a wheelchair at the time, but I was able to communicate that to my parents and the rest of my team. So then running out of the hospital became our common goal and what we were working towards every week. And later in the story, I'll share how that inner voice came up again in my life and how it led me to the work that I'm doing today with Common Goal and my speaking, and basically what I'm doing today with you and your listeners here. So E is energy. Energy, maintaining your energy allows your body's natural ability to be able to heal itself. Medication has the potential to get in the way of that. So obviously within reason here, that first night in the hospital after my accident cost $250,000. So if it wasn't for modern medicine, I wouldn't be here today. However, there was a use, time, and place for everything. And a month after I came out of the ICU was a time that we needed to allow the body to heal itself. I always love talking about this because I still work on it to this day, and I still do stuff to keep my energy high to this day. But back during my accident, after I came out of the ICU, I still wasn't, at this point, I still wasn't cleared to walk. I was within a week or two, maybe. I was pretty good on my feet, but I still wasn't cleared to walk. And I got up in the middle of the night, and I would always have like a grandfather or my dad or an uncle stay with me at night. And I believe it was my grandfather that was staying with me at the time. And I tried to get his attention, Liz. I got up in the middle of the night. I said, Bub. He didn't hear me. I call him Bub. Um, and he didn't hear me. So I was able to hobble my way to the bathroom, use the bathroom and get back. There was no problem. However, the hospital found out the next day and they freaked out. They're like, oh, we can't have this and liability, and we're going to give him this many cc's of that medication, this many cc's of this other medication, and that should calm him down before bed. And my mom heard that and she said, no, you're not. So just ask him not to do that. So they asked me not to do that, and it didn't happen again. But if I didn't have that advocate, and that's part of what I teach within STEP, and within STEP, the ebook, what I'm going over is just a 10,000 foot view of the STEP system, but I'll give your listeners a way they can download the entire STEP system for free at the end.
Yes.
But talking about energy, so because I had someone there watching out for me, I was able to stay off that medication that allowed my body to continue to heal itself. P is persistence. So once you take your first step, keep getting up every day and taking your next step, no matter how small. By continuing to move forward every day, you are building an unstoppable momentum. So if you fast forward less than 60 days after being transferred to the rehab hospital, I realized my goal of running out of the hospital. And it wasn't like my work was done. I had to, Liz, continue to go to outpatient therapy for another 6 months, along with being tutored all summer long, 5 days a week, in order to continue on to high school with the rest of my classmates. And it was really, it's kind of surreal that only 18 months later, because when you're younger, as I'm sure you can relate to, time is compressed. So something like 12 months, 18 months, 24 months seems like a lifetime away. However, it's really not that long looking back at it. Like 18 months is not a lot of time. So I actually had a mentor reflect it back to me. She said, wait a minute. So only 18 months after finishing rehab from your snowboarding accident, you got your start door knocking pre-foreclosure doors, like going to some not so good areas of cities and door knocking pre-foreclosure doors. And I was like, it kind of took me back, because I was like, well, oh yeah, that's really not a lot of time. So um, it, that's what I did during high school. So my job was to set up meetings for one of our investors to go and meet with them about potentially buying their home. So I continued doing that through high school. And then after getting out, I got my real estate license. And really in 2012, I developed a voice issue. So I couldn't figure out what was wrong with my voice. And I remember being out to dinner at the end of the summer of 2012 with my mom, and I remember her bringing up to me that, hey, what's going on with your voice? It sounds different. And I remember brushing it off because I didn't want to accept it. And looking back on it, this is the first step that I missed taking. And what caused this is, I heard somewhere in some training that you're supposed to chant your scripts before you get on the phone to prospect for new clients, new business as a realtor. And I interpreted that as, oh, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to scream through my scripts. So not only will this get my energy up, but it will really reinforce the scripts so I know them in my bones. And I really thought I've cracked the code on being successful as a realtor and get more deals and everything. And it took until that time, like the end of summer 2012, where I was like, all right, something's going on. Maybe something's going on. And then if you kind of fast forward, I remember Columbus Day 2012. And the office I was working at, it was literally no one was there. It was a holiday. However, I was working, I was making my calls. And on that day, before I got on the phone, and every day that year, I would scream my script 3 times before getting on the phone to prospect. And on this day, Columbus Day, on the third time doing it, my voice gave out and I started laughing. I caught my reflection. I was bent over laughing. I know it sounds ridiculous now, just recanting that, but I was bent over laughing and I caught my reflection in the glass and I thought, that's it. That's why my voice sounds different. So from then on, I stopped the screaming of my scripts, but it was too late. The
Mm.
damage had already been done. So Columbus Day was October 8th, 2012. And by the end of October, my voice wasn't coming back. So I was looking for answers everywhere. And then if you fast forward to a year later, I wound up in a voice specialist office in Boston. And I was all stressed out in my head, and I worked this up, and it's such a big deal, meet with a specialist and everything. And I was in Boston, and I remember him walking into the room, hearing me talk, and just going, "Oh, that? Yeah, we deal with that all the time. We'll get it fixed in no time. Go see the front desk and schedule a Botox injection in a couple weeks." So I was like, my mouth, if you could see it was on the floor. I was like, "Are you kidding me?" So I got scheduled and I started receiving Botox injections into my throat along with their higher level voice therapist. And I had to do that for 7 years. So if anyone had ever told me that you have to do something for 7 years, it would have been completely overwhelming. However, because I took it one step at a time, I now have my voice back for the second time. So it was at this point that I realized that I had a message and a strategy to be able to share with the world. I was like, I have something here because I didn't realize it. It just, when I got my accent, it was just something that happened when I was growing up. However, when I overcame something else, and I might have recency bias, but I'm more proud of the voice, having overcome the voice issue because it took 8 full years really before it was out of my system. I think I'm more proud of that than I am my accident. And once I overcame that, and I was on the other side of it, I was like, all right, I have something here that I can really help people with and share with the world. So uh, that's where really the whole common goal, the whole idea came into my mind of helping people. So with that, and I'll go into detail on that about an inner voice and everything. I'll take a breath there and if you have any questions, Liz.
I do have a couple of questions. First of all, absolutely fantastic story. And you're a marvelous storyteller because you painted the picture so vivid. I was up on that hill with you when you were talking about snowboarding and just the energy. When you talk about the high energy and so much that you talked about is so in alignment with the message. The message here at the Get Trauma Informed podcast is that we do have the power. We just have to tap into it. And you just gave us the steps, right? You talked about high energy, right? And you talked about self-care. That is so important. And I just want to jump through the screen and grab your mom and just hug her because she was so on point about not allowing them to talk over you and not allowing you to hear the negativity. I think those are some key points because we always hear point out how do we overcome, like what are the practical steps, right? So having positive people around you, we say get rid of negative people, places, and things. And when you're working through and walking on your self-care. So the mindful powerness, that just mindful and being having power, that's so incredible. And you running out. I mean, there's so many things that gave me goosebumps over here. You talked about running out of the hospital. I hope you all pay attention to that because you put it in your mind not to walk, but to run out, right? And I say it is in alignment because I said I would not be in a wheelchair and I was not going through the surgery, right? So I had to do everything else in the self-care naturopathic arena, including learning it in order to apply it to myself first. So I just want to applaud you for that. You just gave us so many amazing, amazing nuggets.
Could
You
I
said you
could I
go
talk
ahead.
about that a little bit? Like
Yes,
drill down on that
please.
a little bit.
Yes.
So it wasn't an idea that I implanted in my mind. It was an idea that that came into my mind. It wasn't, I didn't implant it. I still couldn't talk. I was still in a wheelchair. I still couldn't talk. However, one of the things that I've always been attuned to is listening to that inner voice inside of myself. So let me just share a little bit about how that came up and came up again later in my life. So during my accident, I heard the voice then talking about, all right, how is he going to make a full recovery? I heard the voice, no, you're going to run out. So then later in my life, and really all throughout my life, since I got out of school, since I got out of high school, I've always had this voice, no matter what I'm doing, whether it's door knocking, as a realtor, working with sellers, working with buyers, I've always had this voice in my head that's always saying, yeah, okay, great. But what you really need to be doing is telling your story from stage and helping people to get through their trauma. Of course, that's the first thing. Deal with what's in front of you, but then to thrive with the rest of their lives. And I've always had this voice in the back of my head saying that. So I spoke in with our company because I haven't had my real estate license since January of 2016. I'm now working within a family coaching and consulting business. And we work with associates all over the country. And for that, or because of that, I've always had the ability to tell my story from stage once or twice a year. And that's always been scratching the itch, if you will.
Right.
Pardon the pun, but scratching the itch, if you will, of
Right.
okay, I'm telling my story from stage. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. However, that's not really it. So I was still dealing with I was in the final throes of my voice issue in 5 years ago, a little over 5 years ago, September of 2019. And I told my story. I shared my story at our event there. And I think it was like maybe 15 or 20 minutes. And that was long for me. I was like, oh my gosh, that's a long time. And I shared my story. My voice was still strained at that point. However, someone heard me, and they approached me after and said, I'm not trying to steal you from your dad and your family real estate business. But if you're ever looking to fine tune your message and bring it to another level so that you have maximum impact, I can open some doors for you and introduce you to some mentors and coaches that'll help you get started. Well, as I said, I was still dealing with my voice issue, so I hung on to her card. And then it was over 18 months later in in May of 2021, I finally reached out to her and said, okay, I'm ready. Because that voice kept getting louder and louder. And no matter what I did, I couldn't shut it up. It wouldn't be quiet. So
Yes, yes.
I reached out to her and said, okay, I'm ready. What should I do? And she introduced me to her mentor, who became my mentor, still to this day, Trisha Brooke. And ever since that first call with Trisha in May of 2021, there has been no voice in the back of my head. So what that's evidence of to me is that I'm on exactly the right path and I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. So Trisha was the one. I shared my goals with her in May of 2021. I said, do you think that's possible? She said, yes. And I said, all right, what should I do? She said, the speaker salon. That was the fall of 2021. I did that. And during that, she approached me with the idea of what it would look like to work one-on-one with her. And she said she works with speakers to help them build out their speaker platform. Liz, I didn't even know what that was. I didn't even know what a speaker platform was. However,
Yes.
I know I wanted more of her, Trisha. And I said yes. And I started working with her one-on-one. And she was the one that really helped me launch my company, Common Goal. And she's the one that pulled out the step system from me. Because she said, Nick, all right, you have this great story. You got in your accident, you were in a coma, and then you ran out of the hospital. How'd you do it? I said, I don't know. I just got up every day and kept working. I did the best I could and I made it. She goes, no, not good enough. So she kept asking me like 7 or 8 layers deep to a point, Liz, where I was frustrated. I was like, I
I
don't
get it.
know. Stop asking me. It's like, we can't, we get on the call. We can't do this. And I'm so thankful of that though, because that one-on-one work with her, she was able to help me pull the step system out of me. And that's what I teach now. And remember how I said when that person saw me speak in 2019, it was the longest I spoke was maybe 15 or 20 minutes. Now I'm teaching the step system with like brain injury associations,
Yes.
dysphonia associations, other associations that support individuals that are dealing with trauma for 50 and 60-minute keynotes. And I
Mm,
could have never fathomed that.
yes.
I would even know how to do that. So I'm just I'm thrilled not to break into your commentary on we're on E, but I wanted to say that
No, I appreciate that. I totally appreciate that. And our conversation has just been so full of amazing, amazing nuggets. One of the things, and we backed into this, I normally ask as we are starting to wrap up, what does get trauma informed mean to you? So I have 3 questions for you. We're going to put them together instead of sprinkling them out like we normally do. But I think this conversation was so worth you just giving us all that you've given us. But so what does get trauma informed mean to you?
it means being present. So I want to so being present with what you're going through. So when you're going through, no matter what kind of trauma it is, when you're going through it, I know this step system, what I teach is valuable. And it's helped so many people. However, when you're going through trauma, and that's why you said, what does get trauma informed mean to you? When you're going through trauma, it's just dealing with being in the moment and dealing with every day, getting up, whether it's literally or figuratively, getting up and dealing with what's in front of you. So that's why I think being in the moment is so important.
Wonderful. Yes, that's so important to our message here about becoming aware because we can't deal with or recover from something that we're not aware of. And so becoming aware is a big a polarizing message. It's just that's we're going into your steps. That's the first step is to become aware, right? And so how has trauma empowered and inspired you?
All right, so I would say a few things on this. The going through my accident, and you've alluded to it a few times during our back and forth, our conversation here, is that you used to look at it as a bad thing. However, now you realize it was a good thing to go through your trauma and have to overcome your trauma. Um, so me looking back on it, I'd 100% do the same thing. I'd 100% go through it because it we haven't got religious or anything like that, but I feel like God,
Yes.
whether it's God, the universe,
Yes.
God wouldn't have presented me with this situation and wouldn't have presented you with that, with your situation, your trauma you've dealt with, if um he or she or it didn't know that you could overcome it and be able to help others with your story of being able to overcome it. Uh,
Absolutely. Yes, yes. I was in service on yesterday, and I'm glad you brought that up. I know that's something that we do in the speaker world. We make sure that we respect other people's religion or not so or what have you, but we respectful of it. And I definitely let my listeners know that my higher power is God. And I was in service on yesterday, and something was so profound. Our bishop talked about as we're walking through life, where we start off as cubs and we start to grow like Simba did. And in the face of trauma, we learn how to roar. We learn our voice. And I think that was like so profound to me because
Oh yeah.
oftentimes we don't have our voice. We don't know what our voice is. But as we walk through trauma, it does strengthen you, to be able to roar. And you are doing it from the stages, from talking to people. And I applaud you for that. And so welcome to you went through a literal voice issue as you were finding your voice to roar. So I love that. What would you say to someone faced with trauma?
As you and I have covered here, trauma means different things to different people, and I don't want to belittle anyone's trauma by talking about my trauma. Um, However, the message for anyone, any level of trauma that you're dealing with, is just to keep taking that next step. And then what's most important is your first step. So that's the most important step of all. There are so many people that are stuck, they're frozen. They just don't know what to do. And the most important thing I think with dealing with any kind of trauma, whatever severity, is you have to just take that first step. Because once you take your first step, your next step is always going to be available to you.
Yes, wow. This has been such a great conversation. We're going to put your information down in the show notes. But is there anything that you would like to leave our audience with today?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a blast being with you and your audience here. The what we covered, believe it or not, is only a 10,000-foot view of the STEP system. I said drliz before, if you don't give me guardrails, we could go for 2 hours. So thank you for doing that at the beginning. How your listeners can download the entire STEP system for free is go to nickprefontaine.com/step, and that's going to teach them all about support, trust, energy, and persistence. And it will help them to take their first step today.
That is so amazing. And I thank you for giving back and having a heart to give back to others and for walking your whole amazing step up, your whole amazing story out with us and introducing us to the step process. So thank you so much. And I have enjoyed you being a guest here today. And I want you to be a friend of the show. So we want to have you back. And so we will be back in contact. Until then, everybody, have an amazing, amazing day. And thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.